are and some Jura Piganzo Shasania, Geshe Teles.
So to all retreatants, welcome. Good to see you. And Tashi Dele.
Are I didn't read down to give Geshe Thubten some dear ready, ne Kashine, that Salmon Puli Pesa Yule, even bigger down to Chisa, then you get some dear Shadi, and the Tushu Combo Chita, and it's a Tachimbochi, Chimbora Chadure, just not during Chasangi, Geshe Thubten Peva Delia, and Jesuirada, and the chick, or Jesuira Shubus.
I really rejoice in your decision to utilize what really is very valuable free time to come here, to learn about the paths to gain actual freedom. This really is a fantastic use of this opportunity. So I rejoice in the decisions that you have each individually made.
That Hassan ya Sabbath de Sabbath Karchevana de Valwata Hassan Sabbath Saturday, Yaga Jaya Maka Yaga Chuna, Ditu, Maju, Duara Chune, Sasar Yamar. That didn't say the Tunuchi water, that didn't say Tunuchi. Just that Mahomba said the Sanin said the young Yura, Mahomba said the Unigu Chadder, but Chizan to give Karine. Chike Mangche Lega said the Mahomban, Lojemada, Dawa Chemada, Sanigi, Denigi Tone, Mahombe, Cheshi Dinge, and Jiglegarach, Mangche, Dene Chigor, Wadanzi, Chesa Mahomba de Geche, Dada Dam, Mahomba, Mahomba de Geche, Dade de Karinada, Mandu Pashipaje, Titu of Chagoro, or the Mahomba de Geche Machagor. Edinashin, Danga to get Sete, Mahomba Giwachima Sabainada, Sedidi, and you get up. Garina mi Ludian Trupia Karina, that was treaty or a chagor, which is a dinner and said, the Mohombala and the Yakuya Tondala, and Anjuki, that in Lega gave it out to Kuadi and Yechambura Chadurva.
The accumulation of virtue, or the strengthening of our habituation to virtuous ways of thinking, this is something of great importance. So here, right at the outset of our time together, we recognize that everything that has come up to this point is in the past. It's gone. It came around and it has passed. And here, it can just be let go of. Our mind does not need to dwell on the past. When I look at then the time that lies, that is what we generally call our present, so today, this is a brief period of time. It will very quickly be over. Then when we look to our future, this is an immense stretch of time. We can look at it in terms of days, weeks, months, years, and this immense period of time before us. So therefore, just like in our everyday life, it makes sense to focus on the future because it's this immense expanse of time. Today is very brief. The past is past. So focusing on the future makes sense. And then when one brings into one's account future lives, the lives that lie beyond this one, then we really get a taste for the immensity of time that lies before us. Therefore, accumulating virtue that will bring about good results in the future is of great importance.
Dine Zada dealing on the Karishua Lamna, and the Shimbeshira Sadi, and the Tixichura and Dihormashuare.
So in the context of accumulating virtue, we're going to go through just one verse, this very famous verse called Parting from the Four Clingings.
Tisa, Daddy Shimbeshira Sadi, Yama, Ne Sajagi, Lama, and the Kunga Nyingpo, Sadi, and Korong Samna Shuche. Some to Jason Jambea, Trupche, and the Sam Shunian, and Lucian, some Shunian, and Denigi, and Jesu Sam Shube, Kashunian, and Denigi Chele, and Jason Jambea, She Siche, and Jesu Jambeangi, and and the Shimbashira Songje, the Parkuran Yamnaje Horation, and the Songje, and the Negi, and the Songbadi, and Saja Kunga Yibo Korongi, Nyamsule, and Denema, and Koranzu Loma Jinichi, the Gush, and those Pantati Badu, and those in Yamne, Yetibachi Chagore.
One of the great teachers, founder teachers of the Sakya tradition, Kunga Nyingpo, he was in retreat, and in retreat, he encountered directly Manjushri. And Manjushri taught to him this verse, and he taught it to him explicitly as practice advice for what to practice in retreat. And then this great Lama, Kunga Nyingpo, he meditated on these 4 lines. And after his retreat, he then taught this verse to his students as practice advice.
And
whilst it's just a single verse, 4 lines, the meaning contained within is inconceivably vast.
Means, and Kamsum means, and Dadun means, Zimbachuna Tawa means,
So the verse is, if you cling to this life, you're not a practitioner. If you cling to the 3 realms, you're not a renunciate. If you cling to self-interest, you're not a bodhisattva. If grasping arises, you do not have the view.
And Dondala Karsos, Cetila Shina Chuba means it, Cetila Shambadan Jawachko, Jago, or Cetila Shambadan Jago, or Dambodi.
The first line, if you cling to this life, you're not a practitioner. The implied meaning then is one needs to abandon clinging to this life.
That's Nibadi Kamsumla Shena Nijumi said, Kamsumgi Chele Shambadan Jahores or Shamba Jahores.
The second line, the implied meaning is that one needs to abandon one's clinging to the 3 realms of samsara.
On the Daudun Shena Jansen means it that Randa Shendun Yinane, Randun Shamba de Jahores.
The third line, between the 2, striving for one's own benefit or striving for the benefit of others, it's striving for the benefit of others that one needs to engage in. One needs to abandon one's clinging to striving for one's own self-interest, one's own benefit.
Another Zimbajuna Tawa means it is not that Chetamja Ranshin Juba the Zimbati Zimbi, in the Ranshin Juba, Simbi, Zin Shembati and Jahu.
And the final line is that one needs to abandon grasping at self-existence.
Shemba Shidan Jagu, Cedilla Shemba, Cedi Shemba Java, Kamsumla Shemba Java, Daduna, Rangit, Randula Shemba the Java, and the Chetam Temple Juba Zimbi Shemba and Jagu, Shemba Shiras and that do she said.
So this verse, which is called parting from the 4 clingings. So the 4 clingings that one is to part from or abandon are clinging to this life, clinging to the 3 realms of samsara, clinging to one's own self-interest as opposed to rather engaging for the interest of others, and abandoning grasping at all phenomena as being truly existent.
Oh, that's Dinalia, Yamlingi Jimba Chasan, Dina de Dude, du Sarachazan, Yamling Jimba Chasan, Dina Dugore.
And within these 4 lines, the entirety of the trainings that one needs to cultivate within are found. So looking from the perspective that we're very familiar with, that of the Lamrim as presented by great teachers such as Lama Tsongkhapa, we see in the first line, there, if you cling to this life, you're not a practitioner. So this is the training of a practitioner of initial capacity. In the second line, if you cling to the three realms, this is the refers to or relates to the trainings that are shared with a practitioner of intermediate capacity.
다 다된래시나 장세미 진보춘나 다와민세 신이디기 태바천비기 남기린비 남샤팅 거래.
And the trainings of the Mahayana practitioner of great capacity, these are referred to in the third and fourth line. If you cling to self-interest, you're not a bodhisattva. If grasping arises, you do not have the view.
어디니 자다디나데 남기린바 차상아치 뒤에 된데 바차고 지산 시제직마도 요마데 되는데 같이무 쉬우죠 바차고래.
So whilst we find here, this is just a single verse, the meaning contained within is inconceivably vast.
어다 되네게 알라마 미 기신 담바 아니지 사자 군가 닝볼이야 아니지 미 배메시 대양 아니지 지진 전배양 쭉 지진 전배양 시에순이 지진 전배 양기 양랑기 송비게 송 되네게 직제디 안 되는 마다도 봐도 냠는 제도 실림바 마주이네 되네게 따지게 되네 직디 퇴비게 된들이야 직도 생활서 삼다 냠는 제하고 거라데 직 배마세 지금 이 쇠남 첨보지다 니께왕 아멘에 다 되네기가 저게 몰람다 이 몰람 예대 바자 쇠남 예대 바지나 되네 고급 야보로 배 야고 쇼리 선배당은 도시네 대산 되네게 삼다야다 되네게 돈에 되네게 냠는 셔야디야 심지어 탐지기 되는 산요고 보도비 철동이디 된다디 퇴치디 칙디 퇴치디 된다라 삼제 다 소수게 강토된 냠는 지긴 선배이다 어두시네 삼당고로 와당도 공을 마서나.
For yourselves, having heard this the presentation thus far, the purpose behind what I've presented is to give rise to a great appreciation for this opportunity that you have taken, that you having decided to come here to spend your free time coming to cultivate the causes that lead to actual freedom. This is something to recognize and to rejoice in. So in hearing that this one verse was taught by Manjushri to this great Sakyalama in retreat and was taught to him to put into practice in his meditation so as to gain freedom. And thereafter, there's the Kunga Nyingpo. He taught this verse to his students so as to to enable them to have that same opportunity to put these words into practice, to cultivate them in their mind, and thereby also gain freedom. That same opportunity, each of us now has too. Recognizing this then, give rise to a determination to utilize this opportunity well, to keep one's mind focused on the deep meaning contained within this single verse.
제사다 이게 가르친 거래세네 제사 세딜레시나 추바미 세디 나라 가지고 최기 톤에 롭정티에데 망지 강시 다 치 튕경오버 차나 낭섬로 따타는 남성 섬로 따타는 기시거래 제사 가지고 섬로 따타디 디비게 마디비 톤에 안 섬로 따타 노트시다 니 톤에 가지고야 안 좀데야 동아 용어다 강아태와지 용거래 제사 가지고 동아 용아디 용거와 다 삼노다나 야부지다 삼노다다 지데바 용의니 수데 튠베지 삼노다 투바이나 안 딜레데네 데보디야 안지 야부지다 안지 된다 된바지 용거로와 디네인자 당한 저기 삼다하디 디 삼다다데 노고 오레디 삼다교 말에 제사다 마오바나 디기 중요하라 삼노디다네 디교 말에스 제사 수수 동아시야다 디기 중요하라 삼노다다디 데니스 땅고레 세지 송고르다 된다 아주 삼는 단다기 당아주 이게 아주 삼는 나라 아주 넘기는 치수다디 직접바를 통마도 나는 삼로디 샤라 아주 통고 말아 제사다 소수기 삼는 다수 칼로지 소수 삼는 난다제 소수 삼는 나라야 삼는 간에 간에 코고 버디 데네데네 코고라 디 코야디 삼는 데니 삼다디 노트리에서지다 데네 안데 가르탄 거는 삼는 데니 시당 고고레디 야고레에서디 데송고르와 데네 자다 삼노게 안주기 삼노 다나 삼노데 당봉 오트시고레
The purpose of this first line, if you cling to this life, you're not a practitioner, is to guide each individual to recognize where their mental activity primarily is. And where our mind primarily is, or what our mind is primarily engaged in, is in the material world. Things that we see, things that we hear, and so forth. This is what dominates our thoughts, dominates our speech and our actions. And whilst there is need and purpose to engage in the material world, we have no balance. The amount of energy that we put into the material world is all motivated by, I want to gain happiness, freedom from suffering. But as we know from lifetimes of experience, this will never come from focusing in such an overwhelming manner on the material world. So this first line serves as a wake-up call to adjust our focus, to put our attention on what matters, and that is on the transformation of the inner world. To the extent we transform our way of thinking, our mind becomes calmer, more peaceful. The outer world no longer excites us in the same way. We are no longer so stimulated by the outer world. We rather come to gain more peace through transforming our inner world and recognize that this is now the journey that we have now embarked on, the journey to gain complete transformation, freedom. So this first line, by reflecting on it, it encourages us to let go of what dominates our mind but has no real importance, and to rather have the focus, the strength of mind, the determination to let go of these habituations and to cultivate the inner world, to transform the inner world, and thereby create the causes for lasting happiness.
지게 체외 삼바실라 네베 삼부 공로 주나 류가 줘바디야 약부 매바 네베 샤네 네베지 기현데 용하차 두차고로 디네 자 소수기 시연도 룹시네 공로 상부 주나 현리에 판비 자월 비시 다투야다 공로 엠바 주나 현리에 체와 네베 치고 슈치모 게리야 아니 강아제리야 비시 당고로 지자 차상 아주 공로 셈을 라리고로 지자 디네 인자 당아주 삼로 다다디 토네 아니 야와체제 노트디 임바디 디리샤 지산디 노트 멤버 디리 디네 삼당고레세디 다 야와체 송와야디 디리.
The focus of the Buddha's teachings, the focus of this verse is on the mind, on transforming the mind, because the very impact our physical and verbal conduct has on ourselves as well as on others depends on our motivation. It depends on our mind. If our mind is virtuous, if it's focused on things of real meaning, that is a virtuous mind. And from this, our speech and our physical behavior will be wholesome and will bring benefit to ourselves and to others. But if our mind is consumed with things of no real meaning, our motivation is if it's virtuous, is going to be weak, and it may well be non-virtuous, and therefore our resulting physical and verbal behavior will bring harm to ourselves and to others. Hence, the need to radically transform how we think to be able to develop a stable, virtuous motivation.
지고 말해서 고거를 제대로 현재 전전 디용도 송하시네 제반능의 최제하고 그러고 말해서 나 디니시 제대로 신의 초반면세디 지자 제대로게 자와래 현재 안 디용도 송하시는 최제야 안 고거 그러고 말해서 동보디.
To the extent that one clings to this one life, the opportunity to cultivate the Dharma within will be lost. If one clings in a very strong manner to this one life, one will not accomplish the Dharma or accomplish the Dharma at all. If one's mind is still primarily on this life, then the extent to which one cultivates the Dharma will be weak, will be insignificant compared to our capacity. So therefore the meaning of this first line is to challenge this clinging to this life.
这语这现世个语的的这地个家伙，这地个原先了呀，现这地了是对的那个这地个国货的那头了呀，这语是对的现个语的，现是对的别了的呀，我是囊这别呀，我了什么地上什么的上面当的金把的了的，先把是我的这地了先把是的，其实的。这地个原先，这地咱们原先里怕这个变得语体些现些，那里啊，按照别的要过来什么个怕先把的金把的来先把是我这地来先把是。
If you cling to this life, so this life means this life's activities, seeing and more so activities, conduct, the various things that we do that to achieve happiness that will only be experienced in this life. Seeing that as the pathway to achieve happiness, seeing these various activities and endeavors as sources of actual happiness. This is completely mistaken. This one needs to recognize, because to the extent that one strives for in activities related just to this life, one is not a practitioner.
체델에 미망치게 삼로 갈당 거서는 아주 내가 가르치고서 삼로 나려야 땅 아주를 세야고 고도 고해게 둘로야고 고요야고 고도 강바야고 고도 대자 강변나래 진실에 야고 고도 좀 되는지 주나 안소소이 되기 용그레에서 배가 생일이 세배 되네게 대수배 야고를 쉬우신낭 델파 즉 디짱야 삼다제 델파 배 현차게제 현바 현차게 아니 디 주위에 돈달라 먼저 레가라지 망보도 신 레가레지네 루신 레고호 되고래 제자다 제와 치매 최den교 말에서 더 최치고 말den교 말에서 제자 델레 고호지 현샤스데 다 현의 유디라 먼저 세델로고야게 세 ungwe nema sen desa kangbala an malchasde kangbena 진짜라 소바 제산 대소 지기 중마다 강아 탐제 세기를 선배게 소속에 삼나래야 강아 세기를 띵아주다 강아 세야라 탑이 약쇼디 디레 니고 선배게 데네게 삼다제 델파 이야고지베 현재 니게 현배 디옹도 손지네 아 저게 디옹도 손 군로 디게 옹도 손지 자와짱 제시는 네 최대 최념는데 제투고 말해야지 제산 제대로 신나 최 지셰베메 제신의 유세의 내말 안 대소를 현재 삼 신바제 디왕기 안직베게디나다 예 지니 야라네 매니바도 시앙즈게 디나 디도나 짱짱 레갈레제 네 최셰의 고브라고 말해서 송거래 다디 삼나 다나 직송거래.
If you cling to this life, so clinging is a mind, or a way the mind engages. And what does it engage with is this life. So this life refers to the various objects of this life, what the mind is clinging towards or clinging at. So these would be things that we see as indispensable, as our actual sources of happiness. And here usually food, clothing, our home environments, and so forth. So the mind that clings to this is a mind that sees the attainment and enjoyment of these things as being the route to happiness, and therefore it dominates the mind. So the mind is dominated by the need to engage, again, just to give illustrations, a delicious food, an abundance of food perhaps, a lovely clothing, a lovely home, and this, the mind being dominated by the achievement of and enjoyment of these things, ensures that our physical activities are directed towards attaining and enjoying them. And our speech is about these things. So in this way, one's mind is consumed by clinging to the objects of this mere life. And therefore, the opportunity to actually practice the Dharma, to transform one's mind through the stable cultivation of the Dharma, this is lost.
제가 데네게 세디zam기 데네 유제 데네 짱짱 삼다제네 두스코호트디 딱게와 치마라야 몽바나 야보 영야기 인규디 두고 말했어 두고 말했어 마두디 아니디 삼다타디 디직부 짱짱 삼다데데 만주기 노트에 삼다다 노트샤고 그래지래.
When one clings to this life, one's mind is dominated by the achievement of and the enjoyment of this life's pleasures. Therefore, one hardly gives any thought to lives beyond this. And in this way, then, when one's mind is only focused on this one's life, the opportunity to practice the Dharma will not be accomplished. It will be lost.
차야들이야 콜롱주 세체로 년예도 년예 분야에 네 밤아래 안에 조고래 세다 안에 어당이 사자래 세다 안에 아주 콜유래 세다 되네게 삼다지 대소다지 대소배 될이야 지기 하고 나 될배 현차전에 배 현차전 니 온도 양양 당진다 되네게 내가 내想저기 냐 최제게 맞은지 뒤디간야 삼당배나 아디고 말에 뒤삼당에는 콜 년유도 콜롱주를先把的第三季년유도 콜롱주를先丢了现在니 왕도说的니断달이야 아니 지금 저게 내가 내제 아니 마음반에 개와 치매기 마음반에 디기주게 유 개와 사고 말에스 디지부 디네 삼당에 노를 해서
So clinging to this life, we should understand in terms of what comprises the objects that one clings to very broadly. So it includes, for example, our dear family, our friend, the groups that we associate with, our general environment, and so forth. That these, by clinging to the enjoyment of and developing relationships and so forth, this then too can consume our mental space and therefore direct our physical behavior and our speech. In this way, our mind gets consumed. We get focused just on achieving the good relationships and interactions with others for the pleasure of this one life. And in this way too, our mind is kept far from the Dharma. It becomes, our energy and time gets consumed by these interactions for this mere life.
땀 년자를 차고 그래서 땀 년자 호수 땀다 년자 용 계자 용야다 안에 지금 권해라야다 옹치라야다 내내게 삼다 내내게 체디점에 땀 년자다 권해다 옹치 삼다 차지 디기 내내게 땀 년자 주는 약보래 안에 권해 약보래나 옹치 약보는 배 약보래 선비 약보 삼 델파 현재디 다 두고 선비에 삼다 다지 디 현배 현차 디 원기 안는 저게 내가 나면서 소시에도 드라마라지 두신 내가래 고고지 되니게 마음바나 아니 직디기 주야기 아니 가서를 개와 치마 나서바 탈바 탐지 김고 뭐 토야기 기위 최제에게 삼는도 고고 말해서 지산 되니게 두신의 땀년다 권에 원실이야 차지 두신의 차신 신비 원 신바 되니게 삼는디기 양아 저기 최념의 제도고 말해서 지송 거래.
And further way that by clinging to this life, one lives this life in a way that is not at all balanced, is when one has places great emphasis on wealth, financial stability, one's reputation, what others think about oneself, as well as having power or control over others, influence over others, where these things, again, dominate one's way of thinking and thereby one's behavior. So with these and the illustrations given before, even if one assumes one has already developed a general ethical outlook, by one's mind being consumed by these thoughts relating to enjoyments and results in relation to this mere life, one's opportunity to practice is lost. Moreover, one is likely still even if one generally is ethical, to engage in non-virtue. In particular, if one is concerned about one's reputation, what others are saying about us, thinking about us, or as well as the power and the influence we have in our relationships with others, this too is likely to lead to non-virtue. So therefore, this lack of balance in terms of where we put our energy, this wastes our opportunity to cultivate the Dharma and leads to the accumulation of non-virtue.
아도시네 다 제자 대소는 저기 도 삼단하디 다 세월 실화 당하는 저기 다 지소 나라 망체에 대한 저기다 저기 소수게 자야 동야 뇌사 강바 니 돈달에 양은 저기 그디네 내가 레체네 개와 치마디게 단 tarbiyo wasaada kewa chima lamyo kongon dio seada ane paje samlo kogo mare ane chigi tarba tamji kembe ko wasaada gyune samlo kogo mare jene samlo hoje deni sosugi dulo se ko nemangi dondale kidina lega nya do chine jene ane kewa chimegi ane 주비하게 디기 주비하게 개월 맞춤바디 가지고 세부 통해야 되지 용어지 버려와 네 디나신다 변에 변조 야구 유견지도 있네 아직 시 야구 유견난 변조 야구 유견지네 아직 변조를 통해서 제목은 담년자유야 담년자 깨라야 안 소소 권에 침보래야 원치 침보래야 니 돈달 배지지 디장장 삼다 니 돈달다 지금 간에 지어고도 간에 사고 준비기 삼다지 내가 내신 내 되니게 지어도 제가 디 에능한테 개와 치마기 안 지게 먼저 고방 토야단 라다 탈바다 탐지기 고방 토야기 요몬 빵야기 요몬 빵고도 생비게다 삼노기네 고고 말와제 제가 디네자 체디점이 체디래시나 체디게 세고 내마 안 지게 담년자 안 지게 권예당 원하셔라서바다 되네 예도 콜론절을 파두스네 차신 되네 신비원기 안가도 개와 치마 개와 치마 디기 주비하다 동화세 디 먼저 고바토야다 탈바다 탐지기 고바토 되네게 삼르기네 최사의 좀 삼르기네 고고 말해서 제자 되네게 삼르 지부 땅되바디다 삼르디기 아주 마음보나 동화용의 규례마도 안에 개와 치마 디기 최고 마디 삼다다 노르도여에서 월다 지지 되네 삼다도 최 냠네 제마트 비김센데 삼르 되네게 토네양 아주 최 냠네 야보지 두고 말해서 제가 세딜레신나 최바미 세딜야도 현재 도시된 최야보지 제두고 말해서 디송거래
I don't imagine for any of you what I've presented thus far is difficult to see. I don't imagine for any of you, you hear this and say, oh, this is not the case. Because it's very clear from our own lives thus far, as well as when we in our conversations with others, what those conversations are about, as well as what we observe in terms of the goings on in society. We can see that what people are talking about and where they're putting their energy is entirely focused on achieving the happiness of this mere life. This is the focus of the conversations we largely engage in, or we hear from others, or what we observe in society. It's all this talk and energy about this life alone. And moreover, when we look at those that society or groups within society hold up on a pedestal, hold up as these are their examples. If only I could be like them or have what they have in their life. Those who are wealthy, those who are famous, those who are greatly talented or have had a lot of success in a particular field. If one looks at them and observes what their focus is on, how they live their lives, we see that they too are mainly or entirely focused on, at the very least, maintaining their position in society, if not growing their status, just like everyone else. So we see, therefore, that throughout society, thoughts about accumulating causes for good rebirth, let alone causes for liberation and enlightenment, does not occur to the vast majority of people. In particular, in terms of, maybe you could say, the guiding light behind how people live their lives is entirely focused on this life, not about creating the causes for excellent rebirths. So therefore, we can observe from our own direct lived experience supported by what we observe, just what an obstacle the focusing on this mere life is to the cultivation of the minds of the Dharma.
두스네 계시를 두고 말이야 삼단한도 삼단배당 아주 지소나래야 아주도 삼단배당 아주 점래나래야 데미디게 삼단하도 수치에배당 아주 세부를 하고 두야를 샤고로 와디니게 돈에 제사디니게 담년다 차바당 권내다 원실라 차바이나 이견진에 레가데 지체야도 진에 레가데 근데 지금 라초라 차바 현쇼라 다와 삼나단디 레오데 데네 디도나래 레가 나소치데 현래 뇌배자와 몽부치 데니게 차단 끼요데 디 제부데 아니 라시니가라 강아요라디 마도 영아요 마로 제사디 데네 슝고레스 온도 숭고로와 다던다라 지산체 데니게 최 냠는 지게 타지도 최랑 삼다 냠는 바시기나 다 지게 대차상 담년다다 권내다 원실라 소바다 데니게 네마 시벨라 소바 차상파 파슈파 뢰다제 아니 최념의 제고래서 그러다 데니게 다 뢰다세도 데니게 토네다 대수게 파 담년다라 삼마타와 다점 담년다 주나 마죠 데레가 가이 개발메세 데자 소수게다 개와치마 먼저 개와냠네 지인세 베삼다야다 데네 고네다 원치메나 하메다 강 수체들이야 데네게 말나 개발면도 되나 지 개와치메 디기 주야게 어두시네 개와치냠네 지인세 베삼다 데네게다 체디zamля 세괴네마세 되사다 강바다 녀셔라서 봐 야고 메나 개와메 다 사야로도 칼라로도 당점저 칼라 되는 조장점전에 지기도 셈비게 데네게 삼나제 안두시네 다지게 주님의 제고를 해야지 다디 숨고래지.
So now I encourage you to mentally draw a contrast between the ways of the world in terms of where one's energy is, seeing how the vast majority of people, the activities they engage in, whether it's their work, they're caring for the family or their entertainment, is primarily, could perhaps say, exclusively focused on benefiting themselves and their particular group. In most cases, they're not wanting to cause any harm to others, and they may well try not to, but it's not a dominant concern. If some harm comes, this is easily justified and excused or ignored. So this is the way of our world. Now contrast that to those who are sincerely focused on the Dharma. For them, they have abandoned concerns for this life. They have abandoned clinging to this life. So what would that mean? Thoughts of, or thinking about what others have to say about them, the influence they have over others, the prestige they have, their material comforts. These thoughts, not only do they not guide them, they would not even occur to them. They do not measure the success of their endeavors in terms of the reputation they have. In other words, the praise, the feedback that they have from others, nor in terms of their material comfort. Such thoughts do not occur to them because they have abandoned clinging to this life.
제사다 계시 차상 방치네 아니 신다길 봐 수치 메한 젤바 친제 아니 랍도 중 아니 지게 소수의 랍중 제제 되네게 아니 냠는 제제 산제고 뭐 토로와 어두산에 디나신 제고래 해서 그래 근데 매 디멘비게다 냐마리 대사에 다 지간 주변에 다대사에 다람사다 되네게 비서 사제 구결 바치 참가나 바 차상 뢰다 좀 참되게 먹고요. 어디 나신지는 건전 나신지 냠면제 도신 쉐 넘버다 봐 주야라. 너 건전 나신지 도신 차상 다 이제 뢰다지 도신에 냠면제 주고 그래서지. 다 배로 디스로와다.
To draw your mind to the stark contrast, we think of the example that the Buddha presented in his life. So he was born into a royal family. He was the future ruler of that country, and he had the abundance, the excellences, the wonders that come with a princely life. So he had the very peak of comfort available in the world, and he recognized that this does not lead to happiness. And he left that behind and pursued rather a simple life in the forest. Completely different. But he showed there the example that what the world values, even when someone attains the very peak of what is possible in the world, that is not the path to happiness. And he recognized that, let it go, and went to live a simple life, focusing on what's important. And this example has been followed from then right to our present day. We can think of the meditators in the mountains above Dharamsala or in retreat elsewhere, where they are living a simple life without any thought of what others are saying about me, but just on thoughts on cultivating the Dharma within. And this has come about due to recognizing what has value and pursuing that, and what doesn't have value and no longer being deceived by it.
제가 되네 상계 좀된지 요코로 저 차상 바 뢰다제 바 안두시네 바 네가와체네 네랍도 좀 가와체 되네 상기 코 냠랭기 되네게다 소수기 묘모바 차상 빵 산에 아니 소수기 시에 냠뇨디 다양지선 마페제 미솔 마페제 되네 마 롭종 바되네 냠랭지 바도 소체다 되네데 제가 되네 제고세 소수기 되네기 대시 네 Rabju Majungela, Sosugi, dear Rameba, Nomodi, Ne, Lulonjo, Kola Chapaki, Denigi, Shemba Jungorova, says a deep bang matubna and Zuki Leka di Puida, which you want to marry. Dinezada, San Yijum, di Kenji, Pai, Rabdu Jung, Denesan Yokobato, Tinchasan Yomo, Bachasan Pansan, Denema, Chisolma, should page, and then Chisonalba, Pakazikale page, and Dusin Lojon, Dusin Yam, some of the Tanga, Dineriam, Jogora said, Dusin Sangi, Dusin Kana Nangorwa.
So if you hold in mind then the way the Buddha lived his life as an example to not just those in his community, but as an example for all following generations of students, we recognize recognizing the example that he set of developing his intelligence through gathering knowledge and using this knowledge to look within. And recognize that what the actual sources of happiness are, and what those and the other sources that one generally pursues in society. Not only do they not lead to happiness, they confuse or deceive the mind into believing that they do, and thereby strengthen one's delusion. Recognizing this, he turned his back on it, abandoned clinging to this life, and rather went forth into the homeless life, and and with the meaning really being of going forth into a life where one lets go of what has no real value. And we think of his example. He let go of the pleasures of living in a palace. He let go of the pleasures of living with one's beloved family. And he went forth, but keeping others in mind, that his purpose was to show this example of transforming one's mind by letting go of what actually cannot lead to happiness. And how we can recognize this for ourselves, because I imagine all of you in your various roles in society, in your family, in your communities, you try to bring benefit to others. But you also know that because of your mind being limited by the afflictions, we often make mistakes, and the benefit we bring is thereby limited. The example the Buddha showed was going forth and focusing on transforming the mind by letting go of what's not important. Then, when the afflictions are abandoned, just like the Buddha showed, one returns to society. Then one's beneficial activities bring only benefit. One is able to, with the mind freed of the afflictions, one is able to engage with others in a flawless manner, in a way that only brings benefit. So this is the purpose. One moves away, abandoning what has no value, cultivating what has, and then returning to engage with others directly and help them.
dine zadang zuki chue nyamlin chele miso surang ga ongbo rabjing mongbo yorwa da dine za dine ga ongbo rab nyamlin chen zo tige din sungorwa ongbo rab sene da yaglugi jikpa yaba da khase lo ningdo che yehen da dine khase dingding khase ningdo shedame dine yongorwa da ningdo chenpo yehen za da dine ge du shene le ta je ko zhugorwa da 제가 띵안 들어오는데 되는 두시네 주산 뢰다마도 이제 되고 와 들어오자.
Something else to keep in mind here is that the process of the Dharma is about coming to know your own mind and to lift your confidence and strive in the Dharma, but to do so in a way that is realistic for each individual, because amongst the class of committed practitioners, there are those who are more courageous than others, those who have greater strength of mind than others. So one needs to work in accordance with one's current capacity. And that is something one needs to recognize within oneself.
세메나 뒤에 고에다 내말 고호에 받아 차고로와 제사다 인니들을 제와 치고 디젠 세계 내말에 차신 지교 말로 인니도 콜론질에 차신 지교 말에 손야디기 세계 내면이 돈달에 레가균의 지교 말에 세다 안에 콜론지 인니들이야 제와균의 지교 말에 세대 순고 말로 와다 돈달에 차바다 차진 신의 차신 지교 말에 순고래.
The mature practitioner who looks honestly at their mind and finds that balance between an over-emotional, I can do this, the wish to rush off into the bush and leave everything behind and live the life of complete simplicity under a tree, as well as not going in the other direction of feeling, oh, it's too difficult, I can only continue as I am, or slightly more. Both of these are an extreme. We need to find where we really are right now. And the honest truth is, for us, as ordinary, simple people who've lived largely a life of relative comfort, we do need quite a level of comfort. And if we push ourselves beyond that, abandoning that, this is an extreme, and we will not be able to sustain it, and we will not achieve our goal. We need to recognize that the real thing we are abandoning is not anything material, but it's a mistaken way of thinking. It's this clinging, this emotional response, this emotional desire for things, this clinging. This is what we need to abandon. And to aid the abandoning, we need to find our right balance.
rabchodu kyuba chewa samana segwe nema longju damnyanda chasanpa ane chigi lue tangche ane che nyamne che gore ese shungorwa da ngaranzu dobore diniki lue tangma tuka ngaranzu liya da diniki da kanche le ngaranzu tse di kyang segwe nema di kona la sam nyi du kona la samma tangwa che chizan da tse diki duanda ni ngaranzu segwe nema njugu gore ane kona nyi du da jewa che gore dini je gore hina 대당 셜 대당 디 조마 디간장 삼보다 맞아야지 네 계획진 개와 침미게 삼다제 개와 침미게 된다라야 먼저 고방 되기 주야 개위 침미게 동아세야 되기 주야 삼제 계획 냠저디 제고래서 뭐다 제고래서 데네 양주 지소나라 양주기 지소나 데네 차상略다지 주마토 조마토 그 지소나라 뒤간 조위 아니 데네게 세고래 고요고래 내말 고고래 아니 니니들이야 제와 지고고로 와다 이나 디간장 제제 최념는 gün에 자와 맞 최근에 맞은 바지 맞이스 제가 데네게 교수 수수게다 세고에 내말데 람바점 유주야다 아니 코로니들이야 제와듯이 이제 대다 놈도 아니 디간 삼마다와체 아니 기회 침해 된다려야 인계주 냠네 제야 되게 개와디게 두고고리에서 송거다.
It's important here to try and assess where one is, recognizing that there is a varying degrees of confidence or courage amongst practitioners. And those that have made great effort to let go of this life, they are best held as an aspiration, recognizing that those are the people with great courage who have been able to turn away from this life and embrace the Dharma completely, wholeheartedly. But also, in terms of gaining this balance, to try and not leave and not allow the conclusion we come to that this is my balanced approach, to actually be on the side of wanting to rest in what is comfortable, rather than pushing us beyond what we have done thus far to what we actually are capable of. So this process of seeking a balance is something to be ever watchful for, because it's not fixed, but changes at points in our life. So what it comes down to, or how to experience this change, is to try to turn one's focus ever more away from the achievement of and the enjoyment of this life's pleasures and so forth, and to have an ever-growing focus on lives beyond this. In there, somewhere between these two, is where we find our balance. With a mind focus on future lives, less consumed by the achievement of and enjoyment of the pleasures of this life. Somewhere in there is our balance. And that balance, though, is not static. Slowly keep moving it forward, embracing the Dharma ever more, embracing a focus on achieving causes for lives beyond this, and being less distracted by the pleasures and problems of this life.
Lo jonga strowa buchikche, dene lo judowa, da longa cheba, dene ki minga rukshewe na, da jala jayal masona, mi lo sumjudowa handela, jala di jigo, bene chisho di fa yu di kwe kya rukse. Da di lo jonga doge dan kwe di kya se, kwe jigo chunga che. Dene, ane judo idela di kya se, longa doge ji yangsho de di kya se, pa soso korangi, mi korangi, shu le bakpi ki jala di kya ya shabe na, dene di dorwa, mato, 차상을 찍부지게 길로 숨지 담버지 디까 오일랍나 영화 기네요 말지 롱아르게 갸토야 거요 말와 제가 그거 두고 말 디니자 디니게 잘라게 미코롱기 슈크셀레 박비기 코롱레 외신 참바르리 갸 주바는 차상에 된다 두고 올와다 디나시 산예 점는 디게 최세디 최냠는 제디 미최냠는 제행기 밖에 미기 홍보의 균제 그런 그 뉴벌 빠삐 디제고래 송마다 차살을 찍바 디제고래 디 맞나 요 말에 지겨 말에 판도요 말에 디 송고 말에 되니 인자 제단 체딜레신의 최바미 세디기 수야디기 다 근데 최랍 뉴버 예컨 차상 홍보 지게 튕긴 차상 상되게 되게 있나 전개 지겨 봐 있나 될래야 세그 콜론제 니도 담냐다 차상 뢰다제 내네 최품 부다 제고래 송고래 나 데네게 마토바이네 당한도 지수가 나는 되고 아니 지게 뭐 지당하다 맞아 또그 된다 제야당 니들이야 저와 제제 지라제 조디 안도 최념레제 최계위 개와 치마 주비하기 계획념레제 개와 두고 그래서 좀 니버스 송고래 다 rumba sumba로 지나 데네게 야마토가 강아 휴주 예컨절 예바나 다 예도 지소나로 여러와다 데네여도 데네기 소수의 세고에 담고다 니니들이야 제와체 안에데 데네 짱짱제 최근에 마지막 멤버체 갑레 야생야실 소수 니비 강조 소수고 고급 강요리야 아니 최념는 베스 제고래게 이게와 치마기 먼저 주비하다 데네기 계획 자와 개와도 두고 그래서 너나 디순고다 더 림발 마선다 림바 당보디 누겐지 체디 차상 세고 담냐나 사람 뢰다제 안데 지금 바 리가야로 냠네제 소수기 니버 마틴 바도 이상에 좀 내니 패와다데 자루와 패견 저루와 다음 어디 나시 코드 나시지 냠네제 조고래 성고를 다 림바 당볼.
So if we take as an illustration of varying physical strengths. So we think of a young person in the prime of their lives, maybe in their 20s and 30s. They're pretty strong. They can carry many bags of groceries from the car. And if they may be being helped by a young teenager, that young teenager can carry a bit, but not as much as the person in the prime of their life. And if a young child is wanting to help, that young child will only be able to carry something very light. So we see here that in terms of physical strength, it's very clear there is a gradient. And this gradient is developed. So we need to then take this in terms of our own mental capacity and recognize that there is a gradient too, and find where we currently are. But just like in terms of one's physical strength, physical capacity, this is not fixed. This gradient throughout the course of one's life changes. So we need to look honestly with ourselves and not where we settle on where our strength of mind is, recognize that's what I believe it to be for now. I may well be mistaken, and even if I'm not, this will not be the strength of mind that I will have in the future. It's not fixed. So we need to search out our strength of mind, but not grasp at it tightly as being the way it is, but recognize I may well be more courageous, or I may be pushing myself a bit too far. Either way, how I see myself now in terms of strength of mind is not how I see myself in the future. And we find where we are. There are those who are particularly courageous, that this life doesn't concern them at all, what others say about them, their relationships with others, their pleasures, material pleasures in this life. They are seen in their true perspective and do not consume the mind at all. So there are those who, metaphorically, are living in the forest, under a tree, unconcerned by the material world. And there are others who are not there yet. But someone who's not there yet should hold that mind of abandonment as a sincere aspiration, something expressed in prayer in a heartfelt manner. May I become like that. And they then will practice where they are, with a mind largely focused on the Dharma, but still the mind getting a bit lost in this life as well, in this life's pleasures and relationships and so forth. And then there will be those who are not there yet, those who are still struggling to let go of the striving for this life's pleasures and reputation and relationships, and that still largely dominates their mind. So wherever one finds oneself in these three general levels, it's important to practice in a balanced manner where one is, without grasping at that as being who I am and who I always will be, and to aid one taking a lighter approach to where one recognizes oneself to be, to see that I may well be mistaken. I may be pushing too hard, or I may be holding myself back, not recognizing my actual current capacity. And moreover, also hold a greater level of strength of mind, of commitment, as a sincere aspiration, as wanting to be like that, so that one has this inner propulsion to develop a more courageous mind. And in this way, wherever one finds oneself now, one slowly develops, developing one's fixation on cultivating causes that will lead to excellent rebirths, causes for liberation and enlightenment, and evermore abandoning this life's pleasures.
이사 안저게 미가시 다빈에 심제 소주게 레가라지 되네게 지는 저게 소화기 거야 되네 용거로와 지사 디마레가 디마도 마라틴 제야메디게 되네 용거로와 지사 되네라 상이 줌네 되게 냐마 되네게 미직 되게디나 심제 소주 깐야르지 디빌레가 깐야레시네 어두시네 다 디마제네 코라스 사야동야다 되네게 탑시메디게네 되네시 제디고레스 제자 상해 주면 뒤에 고랑을이야 가르송 버렸은 다 결혼 님의 공란에 다 두시네 디바체 레갈리고 다 세나 공을 결혼 예디급이야 저다 예디급이야 디링이 즉 마 심지어 소주제 현리아 뇌세치자 중징매 선비게 삼다제 주름 송제는 천하와 예류급을 결혼게는 주름 송쇼스네 데네 송제 데네게 아니 그런 니메고는 디벨레 가라시에 마 예류급다 천하와 이후들의 레가셔야지 요 말보다 오늘 제가 데네에서 예류급을 하는 니마혼이야 아디ring에 데네게 예비린들이야 현리아 뇌바다 지기 데네게 차와 지금에 선비게 데네게 삼다제 양이 디버 지금에 지금에 도신 삼단 도신의 예거를 제자디네자 고 천하 공을야 근데 주름 송이게 송아에 고갑다 되고 도신 상이게 탑람 콜야 따직 니메고를 디바자지도 천하고 다가서는 예든데 니 고갑 고갑진이라고 말아 제자디네자고 개와사에 고갑을야 아니 되네게 천하고를 결혼 예류가라 다심제 소주 지금에 선배 삼단이 샤선 송송제는 예스 내 주름 송이야 고갑라와레스 제자 되네기 아니 데볼야 개와치말 그런 아직 니기 용해야 되는식 중화레세지 남나나는 주어리네 제자 상얘기 개인 냠는 제벌에 탑람나서 순고를 당원에 지금
What I'm presenting here is entirely consistent with how the Buddha taught in his lifetime. So there's an illustration from the sutras where he was approached by someone and said, I hear what you say, I agree with what you Buddha are teaching, but I have a problem. I am limited by my means of income. I am a butcher and I have no other means of income. And certainly back in those times, people were quite static or fixed in what work their caste enabled them to do, or their status in society. So this person could only work as a butcher and had no choice. The Buddha said to him in a similar way to what I've been presenting to you. You look at your circumstances honestly, and you do the best you can within the confines of your current circumstances. So, in the day, you need to kill, you kill. But you keep in mind, this is not ideal. Moreover, when you put your knife down at the end of the day, from that moment, every day, make the commitment, until I return here tomorrow, I will not kill. Killing is wrong, and I do not want to do it. And from now, as I put my knife down, until I return here tomorrow and pick it up, I will not kill. And thereby, the person is generating ethical restraint at night and accumulating virtue. Because in those hours, that the person that is not working, they have a virtuous mind. And they have a mind of regret about the non-virtue they've done. And they have a sincere aspiration for the future to be different. They were confined by the constraints of their place in society, and the next day and the next day and the next day they would return and would continue to take life. But every evening, genuine regret for that non-virtue would be generated, and thereby purification would follow. And a sincere aspiration that through this regret, through the virtue I'm accumulating now, may my circumstances change. And in this way, this person did the best they could within the confines of their own circumstances.
Yeah. 아도시에. 다야 된마 당을 저기 체디점이 신제 체디레 신제 아제 체디게 안지기 담냐다다 안지기 년바 닝군 라야다 데네게 토네 아직 개위 냠는 제바 추름송야라 소바데 진바동아라 소바 퇴섬 제바라 소바 니네 용고로 봐 제가 세디레신의 최바미시리 한 don다지레디 송고래 제가 세디점기 담년다 안에 콜롱주 안에 지 콜용하다 데네게 토려야 안지기 삼다시 세디점기 엔디기다 담년다라야 콜롱주니 같이 로마몽보라야 안 소소레 닝고 담년다라야게 don다려야 추름송 진바당 안 퇴비게 퇴제 beneficiency 최슈퇴 and 데니게 don다라 삼마당베네 디 안에 가서를 최지거를 추름송거를 추름송거를 진바당거를 퇴섬지거를 개와 두고어레디 이나인데 개와디 체디점이 된다 주고 차고래스 지산디 제바이나 아니 지고 말해서 지선 최양다 봐 지고 말해서 지선 세딜레신의 최바 민스의 세디점이 된다라 담니 지신제 최차 추름수야다 진바다다 아니 지게 데니게 서버 코미야 데니게 퇴섬제게 기회 차와 추바이네야 두고 할때 이나 세디점레신 세디점이 된다 제바 인자 최양다 봐 차고 말해서 최바 민스의 최양다 봐 제바 차고 말해서
Included in our reflections here, we need to not allow ourselves to be deceived by saying, well, actually, I practice quite a bit of Dharma. I do some generosity, I hear many teachings, I do some meditation, I try to practice patience, and I try to be ethical. I'm practicing a lot of Dharma, and like that, and to that level, one is introspective. That is insufficient. Because it's very easy to be to deceive oneself, thinking that one is practicing the Dharma, but one is really clinging to this life. For example, hearing teachings, reflecting on teachings, and then putting them into practice in one's daily life, one needs to be very clear with oneself. Is the motivation behind my receiving of these teachings, reflecting on them, putting them into practice in my interactions with others, is that focused on this life or on lives to come? Am I wanting to have a particular reputation, to be thought of in a certain way, to be thought of as someone who always comes to the teachings, who acts and displays oneself in a way as if one has knowledge? Am I wanting to be patient with others, so as to be thought of as the patient person? Am I wanting to be patient with others, so that I have less problems in my relations with others? Am I wanting to be generous, so that I have a good reputation, and so that I then can receive things from others? So in this way, we can see very easily how one is engaging in the Dharma, but on a level that can only honestly be called superficial. That is not genuine Dharma practice. Genuine Dharma practice, to the extent that Dharma practice is genuine, the focus is on lives beyond this. So this too is something that one can only come to know for oneself.
제산 소수게 담년다 야보 차야 된다라 아니 미시 주름 야보 순간 현다学呢 될이야 아니 차도 기그리스 고 야보도스네 콜야 마요 코 차도 기는 고 야보 차는 알려 고야 나 담년다 충조서서 비게 현래 차도 기야다 현 최섬지 한 야보 주반의 퇴바 선반 냠네 야보 지긴 될라 차도 기그리스 차도 기야다 아니 소소라라 내 지구에서 비 나게게 랑니 나게게 현래 차도 기 데네게 데네 아니 소술이야 미 아니지 네 녀바당 데네게 아니 저 뚱아마다네 아니 마가와 아니 지금 뚱아 내다 뚱아다다 데네 연구라네 데네 데레 차제 가와기에 제가 데네게 네 연구를 제가 데네다 콩 되차 랑초라 차바 현초라 당와 아니지 랑게 나자 현리야 주름수야도 최섬 냠네 제가래야 차도 기지 뒤제바이나 예산의 지진 최기 와도 송고래. 데네서 와서 니기 차당 아게게디 디바래. 진짜 니기 유가르 차고래서는 뭐바나 안가sol게 동안여에게 규차고래. 그래서 데네서디 디 세디점기 두친 차 온게 차다 데네게 삼다제 개와주야디 나 개위 대보대 충충 마도요 막에서 요번에 세딜라 주주에 마도 개와 치말에 파야요 말레스. 그래서 데네인자 데네기 아니 개워치 담년달에 차지 되니게 수름수야 돼 진바다 진체베네 디기엔 차단기 규기 그래서 되네서 차단기와 개바이나 되네 만절이야 뭐바나 강아체기 만설기야다 되네 강아체기 유튜브로 그래서 되자 디 최야다 봐 지금 말해서 최야다 봐 자기 매비 김사를 뒤순 거래.
And again, as guidance for when looking within, to see how genuine one's Dharma practice is or not, or to express it differently, how one's Dharma practice is whether is focused on this life or not, look for how frequent or infrequent the afflictions arise. If attachment and anger, jealousy, pride, and so forth arise often, easily, and in a sustained manner, this is a sign of one being focused on this life. Whereas if the afflictions are not nearly as dominant as they used to be, this could well be an indication that one's focus is genuinely more on lives to come. So, for example, if one is attached to something, whether it's relationships, whether it's reputation, whether it's material things, this is likely to come from clinging to this life. And when anger then follows, when things do not go one's way, this certainly is likely to be connected to clinging to this life. So too in terms of jealousy in relation to the reputation, perhaps as a practitioner, that one has as opposed to someone else. Jealousy or pride can come. So these afflictions we need to be on guard for, not looking for them in others, but within ourselves. Because these will give away the extent to which we cling to this life. So here I'm referencing the 8 worldly concerns. As long as these dominate us, gain and loss, pleasure and pain, praise and scorn, fame and infamy, to the extent that these dominate us, to that extent we are grasping, or we're clinging rather, to this life. Gain and loss, pain and pleasure, praise and scorn, fame and infamy. And the result of one's mind still being deceived in this way by the afflictions is that whilst we are trying in the Dharma, we are also accumulating a lot of non-virtue. Whilst we are accumulating some causes for excellent rebirths, we are also accumulating causes for the lower realms. So this we need to look out for. And we only can know this by taking the time to look within. And for that, we need to be less obsessed with what is outside of us.
Dini that said this shen je na chena chun so jimba don and twasam chebana that ni cheyang da ba chago mares and da gar chegore la du jige da kunwa yasho di simjian tamje donala simjian tamje ge don san yo go ba to bi chedo simjian tamje donga ja digi juye ge donala ani chum sung yin se bi kunwa dini chine an chum so ya da ani jimba don ya da ani twasam chewadi du chegore di je na ani simjian tamje ge don san yo go ba to bi gulba Jugores, that you could not discourse, the Yashodije. And did them some down to men, then a Korea do not have a true, some Korea do not have a treasure, the Tarbago on the Togo, the Dimaton and Jimindus, Ditovega Dandala, Chedongeda, Sudim Soya, that Chimbataya, Chesamje, did on the Chigues and Beduchin and some Nachores, and did Ching the Chagore. That did Majubena, and that Gewachima. When you go on to go, then one go about Baton Tab Minus, and so let Tarji one go about to the Zangi, Lunganiji, Surim Sungi, and Surim Soyada, and the Jimbataya, Chesum Jad, Guno Dinator Chegores, DJ Beneta, Chegores, the Titigores water.
I encourage you then to look at your genuine motivation, your actual motivation behind your Dharma practice. You're engaging in ethics, generosity, patience, and so forth. And to the extent that you recognize that one is, for example, wanting to be patient because one wants less problems in this life, recognize that one is clinging to this life. That is not the mind or the motivation of a practitioner. If one is being generous because one is wanting to have a good reputation, to be liked by others, to get on with others, to be seen in a certain way, then one is clinging to this life. So this process of inner reflection is up to each one to do individually. And where one notices that, if I'm honest with myself, that is my motivation, then strive to develop a better motivation, a sincere motivation, not a mere expression of words. Because we know the best motivation is that of bodhicitta, where one wants to abandon the afflictions together with their seeds and imprints so that one can become a Buddha in order to lead all beings to also achieve freedom from suffering. That is the very best motivation motivating our ethics, our generosity, our patience, and so forth. That is what we need to try and develop, not as an expression of words, but as a real, genuine motivation. If that's beyond where we are now, then a motivation of, I want my suffering to end. I need to gain freedom from the afflictions, and I need to gain complete liberation from samsara. Such a motivation of middling strength is still an excellent and a genuine motivation of the Dharma. And the third type of genuine motivation of the Dharma is engaging in ethics, generosity, patience, and so forth in order to accumulate causes for an excellent rebirth. So these are the three varying motivations behind the same Dharma practice. But whether it counts as genuine Dharma or not depends whether it is focused at the very least on future lives. So where our motivation genuinely is something for each individual to look within and to recognize where we are.
다디게 당한 중에 체딜의 셴벼 최바민서 최질의 셴디 가르스네 셴의 유딜 가르스네 체디게 세괴 네마 콜롱주 담년다 어느 고사다 원차라서 대시 유지 대장장 삼다지 디야고레 디주고데 디마도 고구민의 선배의 삼다에 딜을 셴바서다 디니게 삼다에 다 디야고 말레스 제가 디니게 삼다에 가지고 최념의 제도로 말해 그시 진바나 추름라서 봐데 디니 냠는 제베네 다 체디지 온선 디게 네 되자 코랑아게 유규차게레스 제가 디 삼다교 말해서 돈다다 체디를 셴바서 디게 돈다디 체 로디차고 제가 신의 유디 체디기 세괴 담 년다 콜롱주 아니 왕차고네라서 봐디 유디체 현세디다 디베야고레서 디장야 삼다되게 삼도디 두스체는 최미된바 디장야 삼다야디 삼다야들다 체딜의 셴바셔야지 다딩아서 체딜의 셴바셔야디기 최어미세 디다 돈다디 직시에사래 단용어 접로 가르치 주그레스는 다 체딜의 셴바디기 파년보 가야려야 삼노칸스 땅고레스 체디잠비 되네게 차가나 차바디 셴바디 로디파 마기야려 탑람 삼나 가르당 고레세 디다 년보 삼다다디 아주 년고 잡을 마셔야지.
Summarize then in brief what we've looked at this morning is this first part of the first line, if you cling to this life. So this life, what it refers to is the general pleasures of this life, including, so this general pleasures we should, or the delights of this life, we should take in a very broad way. Because immediately the mind will think of material pleasures, and that certainly is included. What we eat, what we have to wear, where we live, and so forth. But it also includes our reputation, what others think about us, as well as our relationships with others, as well as, in terms of relationships with others, our control in certain situations, our influence over others, as well as the various events in society, in the world in general. So this is what this life refers to. And then clinging refers to the way our mind thinks about them. A mind that is clinging is not a mind that is merely aware of these things. It's not a mind that is engaging with the world, with these things of the world, in a light, breezy manner, not being caught up in it. Rather, a mind that is clinging is a mind that is grasping strongly at these things and taking pleasure in them. Pleasure both in the sense of the pleasure of enjoying them, the pleasure of striving to enjoy them, as well as the opposite, the displeasure of having to encounter them. So we see from that description how from clinging the afflictions arise. And the afflictions are perhaps most visible if we look inside, and the presence of the afflictions shows that clinging is present. So this is what we need to abandon. How to abandon it? We'll look at that this afternoon.
Oh, yeah,
Then thank you very much. Thank you very much.